to listening to a high-revving Italian engine.
Subscribing to the Audrain Museum Network.
Absolutely. Just like you can respond with that wonderful throttle pedal, so can you by pressing that subscriber button now and the bell icon to be notified when we put up great new content like drives in this Alfa. Join us.
Come watch our videos.
Antonio.
Yes, sir.
The last time we were together in a bright red Italian car that made a lot of noise and had absolutely no cabin airflow, we were on the Mille Miglia.
We were.
And we're going to have to check when we get out of the car to see if the soles of my shoes are still attached.
It's funny because when we did the Mille Miglia, you had your Sparco racing shoes, and those did melt on the first day. We all had to hear how much you loved your Sparco racing shoes. And then I think you were actually wearing these shoes that you're wearing right now, which are more like a casual dress shoe, which survived the entire race and didn't melt.
Exactly.
So you need to call that company and tell them that they make better shoes than Sparco racing shoes.
Well, I'm wearing another pair of shoes from that same company, yes. These are not the actual pair that suffered or experienced the Mille Miglia, but it's a very interesting thing because the experience of being in a vehicle meant for competition on the roads is a very interesting one. We have discussed at some length here in the Audrain Museum Network, in the office, over coffee, and in lots of places, my feeling about track cars on the road. And it's very interesting because going back to the Mille Miglia, which is of course for competition cars, but held on open roads. So there is certainly a precedent for trying to find characteristics in a competition car that are still suitable, if not ideal, for use on a regular road.
For sure. I mean, like you said, we do talk about it often, and you're usually better off with a road car that's suited for road use. But I'm going to directly contradict myself because I have said that before. When you get in something like this, it's like the most exciting 30 minutes of your life. And I can see why somebody would want to build a car in the spirit of the GTA M, which we can talk about. I can see why somebody would want to build a car like that for a 30-minute thrill ride, or if they're a weekend track day warrior, they drive to the track, do the track day, drive home. I mean, this is so much fun. I mean, I don't know. You tell me what you think, but I'm having fun.
Well, I know that before we started rolling cameras, you took this car out for a fuel run.
Yes.
So, since you've just gotten out from behind the wheel, you already have, albeit a brief and commuter-like impression of what this car is like. And let's talk about the car, first of all. This is the 1973 Alfa Romeo GTV, which has been modified to be a tribute to the great Alfa Romeo GTA M.
Which, I'm going to steal your thunder away from you. GTA stands for Gran Turismo a Leggerezza. So it's not like...
Alleggerita.
Alleggerita, you're right. You're right. It's not like Gran Turismo Omologato.
Exactly.
So, you just add a vowel, you know?
And, of course, those cars, the GTAs and the GTA M, of which they made 40 examples, were absolutely legendary in both European touring car, endurance, hill climb, and of course in the great legendary Trans Am series. I first really discovered racing and got involved in following it during the Trans Am era, and Horst Queck and my other heroes driving these GTAs were just amazing to me. And the cars are so incredibly beautiful. It's a classic design by Giorgetto Giugiaro for Pepone. And all the iterations of this car, from the first Giulia GT in 1966 through to the end of production in 1976 in Europe, 74 here in the US, I think are some of the most beautifully proportioned and just perfect cars.
They really are. They really are. I remember the first time I saw a car similar to this, I was at a car show with my dad, Tutto Italiano, at the Lars Anderson Museum. And I could see, sounds so good, doesn't it? I could see how excited, I mean, I was probably 5 or 6, but I could see how excited my dad was to see the car, which in turn, you know, I got a lot of car passion from my dad, which in turn made me really excited because, of course, I was always super passionate about Ferraris and Lamborghinis, which are a very different shape than this car, but seeing a car that looked more like a road car, not like a spaceship, but had the wide fenders and just so much passion behind it, made me always love these cars, and to get to be in it is such a privilege alone.
It is amazing. These cars are made and raced during what I would call the second period of Alfa's great legendary motorsport history. Of course, actually the third, sorry, I must correct myself. In the 1920s, Alfas were absolutely amazing on the road and the Grand Prix circuit. In the 1930s, of course, they were overshadowed by the big German companies, by Mercedes and Auto Union.
Yep.
And of course, after World War II, they came back stronger than ever, not just because there wasn't the competition from Mercedes and Auto Union, but because their pre-war car, the Alfetta, the 158, was just all conquering on the Grand Prix circuit. And they also had great runs in the Mille Miglia, Carrera Panamericana. I mean, it's just absolutely astonishing. And then, after that period in the 1950s, they came back in the 1960s with a vengeance. And, you know, a car like this is just something which just reminds you of all of those wonderful performances, the great cars, the great heroes that drove them.
Now, you and I have had several conversations of great Italian cars over the year, and like you mentioned, we did the Mille Miglia together, and I think the hardest part for you while I was navigating was me being distracted by all the other cars that were on the road.
And motorcycles.
And motorcycles, let's not forget about that. But okay, I have, I could say maybe more skin in the game with my being born in Italy and a super Italian father. And what brought you, a kid from New York, to be so passionate about Alfa Romeos?
Well, it actually came, and I'll tell you a funny story about Alfa Romeo. It came from my boyhood passion for all things historic.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the culture of Italy long before I ever dreamed that I would ever go to Italy, or certainly learn to speak Italian. Just devouring car books and magazines and looking at the pictures of these incredibly beautiful cars. And you know, going back to the late 1940s and early 1950s, the Alfa 60 2500s just looked to me like the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. Totally different than the Buicks and Pontiacs I saw on the street. And I thought, wow, those are really something. And then just looking at every part of it, even though I'm not a mechanic, I'm not an engineer, looking at the castings of the valve covers and the exhaust manifolds, I thought, this is art. This is absolutely amazing, and I just have to learn all I can about these cars. Then, when I finally had the opportunity to drive one, I was just absolutely hooked. I thought, there's nothing better than this. And interestingly enough, when I first started to drive and own cars, I drove old Mercedes Benzes and new Alfa Romeos.
Okay.
Then Alfa dropped out of the US market, and I started driving old Alfa Romeos and new Mercedes Benzes.
Okay.
So it was a thing, and then I discovered Lancia, and that's a totally different story, which we'll cover in a different video. But I think that for me, the idea that you could have, especially with a car like the GT and GTV, GTA, GTAM, a car that actually was directly related to a production model that you could see on the racetracks, not only running, but winning. That to me was so incredibly exciting.
That's very true. And you know, in today's racing, okay, you see like on a I guess you could say a lower scale, you see like spec Miatas, but now you see Formula One cars, which have been around obviously for a long time, but don't really look like anything. And then you have the Le Mans hypercar class, which also doesn't really look like anything you'd see on the road. And then maybe the GT class. Okay, yes, you might have a chance of seeing a Porsche GT3 or a Lamborghini Huracan, but again, don't really look like a real road or a real passenger car, where this really does.
It does indeed, and this particular car that we're driving today, this tribute to a GTAM, is very interesting in the approach that they've taken. Obviously, they've stripped out the interior to save weight. They put in electronic gauges for accuracy. They've obviously eliminated any
I feel like you're dying on the inside saying this.
any sort of sound deadening. Well, you know, I have had the great fortune of driving an original GTA. I've never driven, obviously, a GTAM, but I love lightness. And just like that Seata that we drove on the Mille Miglia, a GTAM feels like that. You are just driving an engine and a body shell.
Yeah.
And it's astonishing because the car's lightness is simply unimaginable. And this car, obviously with a steel body and even without all of the interior in place, is nowhere near as light as a GTA. But what they have done in the build, which is incredibly clever, and a lot of people do this in building cars like this, is they've given it a very similar power to weight ratio feeling because of the engine.
This has an upgraded engine in it.
This has a 1990s Alfa Romeo 155 2-liter twin spark engine.
Wow.
So it only puts out 140 horsepower, but compared to the stock 120 in a GTV of this year, it makes a big difference, especially when you take all the weight out.
Yes. You know, it's funny. You know me, I like horsepower, but as I get older, I enjoy cars that have less horsepower because it feels like you can drive the car more. If we were in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini with 500 or 600 horsepower, we'd be having fun, but I don't think we would be having as much fun as we are in this car. And 140 horsepower seems like a plenty of power for the car that we're in.
Absolutely, and you know, this car is putting a grin on my face.
See, you're liking it. You weren't very happy.
I wasn't convinced at first.
You weren't very happy, but you're liking it.
It's really because of the engine, and it's an interesting thing that as the original Giulia, which became the GTV, as the engines got larger from 1600 cc through 1750, it was actually 1779, but they rounded it down to recall the historic Alfa 1750s of the 1920s. And then to the 2-liter, the engines gained more horsepower, but it was the added torque that really made the difference in a totally different driving experience.
Yep.
This 155 twin spark restores the spirit of the high revving 1600. So this engine, you put your foot down on the throttle and it automatically flies up to 5,500 RPM.
It does really. It sounds so good. And this is a 4-cylinder.
It's a 4-cylinder.
So I feel like 4-cylinders, especially now, are kind of overlooked because the 4-cylinder at this point is really used for efficiency. Okay, you have the modern day tuner car like a WRX. In my opinion, those cars don't really sound that good. Whereas this car sounds really good. It's like unlike no other sound coming down the road.
It is. It actually reminds me of another car which the two of us drove together, the Fiat Cinquecento Abarth.
Yeah.
Very, very free revving, made a great noise, and this is a car that as you said, you know, for that weekend warrior, or for frankly somebody who wants to be able to leave their house on a Saturday morning and do their errands, the dry cleaning and the grocery shopping, you've got a road legal car that still gives you the feel as if you're in the Targa Florio.
It's fun.
It is fun.
It is so much fun.
It is fun. However, deep in my soul and very deep in my pocket, my preference would be to have an early step-nose Giulia GT 66, or the ultimate in this series for many, including me, a 1969 1750 GTV with a flying buttress seats. Such an incredibly neat car. And a GTA.
So, you're the Alfa expert. The earlier cars had two large headlights.
Yes.
When did they go? This one, okay, this is in the style of 4 headlights with the smaller ones on the inside of the grille cut out for more cooling. When did they go to the 4 headlights, and what was the thought process behind that? Was that due to regulation, or? No,
it was very interesting. It's about the character of the car. The first car, the 1600cc Giulia GT, had the twin headlights. The 1750 put driving lights in the grille, and then for the 2000, the 2-liter, they went to the 4 headlight look. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this racer-ish car for the road. And again, I think that where you live makes a big difference in the enjoyment you can get out of this car.
Yeah.
You live in a place that had tons of sort of canyon carving type roads.
This is a good Monterey car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This driving over the Laurellis grade would be absolutely astonishing. You would feel like you're in the Targa Florio.
Yeah. I'm excited to try it out. You know, the only time that I've ever driven an Alfa Romeo is your Alfa Romeo. And it's funny that the next time I get to drive an Alfa Romeo is this one with you again. So maybe the third time, maybe you and I can drive a 33 Stradale or something, you know?
That would be delightful. I happen to have a friend that has one, and I can assure you that he would say, absolutely not. This is one of those cars that demands that you be on it all the time. And it's very much like a totally
It's like an
different
Italian girlfriend, you know? They're always on you about something.
You have to pay attention. If you're not paying attention, you get into trouble.
We don't want that.
And it very much has a lot in common with driving a veteran car.
It does.
Because there's no cruising in this car.
No.
There's no putting your arm out the window and sort of waving at the folks as they go by, which is very, very entertaining.
It is. It's not something you could drive all day long.
No.
This is a really good 30-minute car, or a weekend warrior or something. I mean, like we said, you probably could drive this in Monterey or in California, where you have big mountains that you can kind of exercise it, but
also cooler temperatures.
Cooler temps. I mean, I think we picked the hottest day of the year to drive this car.
But that fits in our character.
It does.
What it is that we're all about. You know, you can't have automotive joy without automotive pain and sorrow.
Automotive pain. I just did a track day on my motorcycle, and it was right at the start of this heat wave that we're having. And we were doing 20-minute sessions. And 20-minute sessions on the Panigale in 90-degree temps in a full suit is tough. And I give a lot of credit to the MotoGP racers who are racing in Malaysia and in these, you know, Southeast Asian countries that have so much heat and humidity. And then I think I relate it directly to car racing. When you and I did the Mille Miglia together, I mean, it was over 100 degrees in that car.
Exactly.
And for, 15, 16 hours of driving a day, I can't imagine what it would have been like to race a car like this in the 70s for hours.
Thinking about driving this in the Targa Florio.
Oh my God.
With a 22-mile lap.
Yeah.
And you're not driving like this. We are on this nice straight road.
Yeah.
There's a curve every 200 feet, and elevation changes, and just the madness of spectators right there on the edge of the road at the apex of your turn.
Yeah.
So
it's just crazy. It's funny. We often talk about on the ABS podcast your favorite topic of discussion, Porsche.
And no Porsche sounds like this.
Nope. Well, no Porsche sounds like this. Not even a 912 or a 356. And we won't talk about price, but at this price point, you could buy a really nice Boxster Spider, a Cayman GT4, which are great cars. But I think from an entertainment value, this is so much more entertaining than one of those cars. And I think to kind of expand people's palettes a little bit, more people, if they have the opportunity to do so, should experience a car like this because it is so much fun to drive. I mean, maybe we were doing 45 miles an hour there.
Exactly.
But it was so much fun. Like you don't need a crazy high horsepower car to have this same level of enjoyment.
And it's also the historical connection that a tribute car like this gives you, because as you just mentioned, you not only are in absolute awe of what the drivers that piloted the original GTA and GTAMs in endurance races and hill climbs had to deal with, but you also feel a bit of a connection with those people driving this car on regular street roads. Have a great deal of fun with the driving experience just getting to the speed limit.
I know.
You know? Now it comes up really fast, so again, you have to just be aware of what's happening, but it is a remarkable thing.
I think also with a car like this, it kind of resets your mind a little bit. It's not a tremendously hard car to drive, but compared to a brand new car, there's a lot more going on with this. With, when you first get off the clutch in first gear, you kind of have to rev it out more than you would with a modern car. Is this car fuel injected, or is
this car is not?
This is
carbureted.
This is carbureted.
Two honking huge Webers on it.
The older people watching this video are going to laugh that I just asked if it was fuel injected. I apologize for my fuel injection comment. It is more challenging than a modern car, but you look back to that 1940 car that we drove in the Mille Miglia, the Seata. I mean, the progression of race car tech and technology was a pretty big jump between that car and this car.
Yes, and in many ways, no. It's very funny because one of the things that, again, makes this car so exciting is the twin spark head.
Well, more modern engine, but yeah.
Interestingly enough, in period for the GTAs, Alfa employed a twin spark head on the 1600 and the 1750 engines. It's technology that, of course, was invented for performance. Again, better combustion and therefore more power out of the engine, but has been used lately for the usual, which is economy. And more efficient combustion also gives you better fuel economy. Not that you care about fuel economy in a car.
I don't care at all about fuel economy. People always ask me, they're like, how many miles a gallon do you get? And I tell them it's miles per gallon.
Exactly. So Antonio, between our run to the dry cleaners, the grocery store, Brescia, down to Rome, back to Brescia, and around the mountains in Sicily, what do you think is a nice weekend driver?
I love it. Are we going to the dry cleaners because of how sweaty we are? Is that...
Exactly.
Okay. Well, I think it's a very good dry cleaner run car, Donald. I really enjoyed myself. Thanks for taking me on the ride.
It's always an adventure and an Alfa.
That's true.